place.
What part would you want to do it at?
Yeah, we do with the business.
So we have these permits by this day.
Yeah, I would do it up there.
Did you receive it?
Yeah, they're visiting.
Yes.
You gonna ask for a moment, or what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I'll ask.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
She is down.
Yeah.
Okay.
You good, Bill?
Yep.
What's up, sir? How are you?
I remember this.
Oh, you did?
I did before I came to.
Yeah.
I will catch.
Remind everyone that they have to bring it in. No, I don't. Thank God. I did too many.
Okay, Billy? Is the mic on? Oh, see a light. Is it okay? How's that? Testing? Not yet, no.
It'll come on a little bit, just a second.
I think we got it now. How's that? My light's on.
Okay.
Better?
Better.
Must be coming up. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the, there we go, Town of Montgomery IDA meeting for March 10th. And we did just complete an initial training in the last hour. All board members were present. Training was done by our counsel, Bob Glockland. As I open the meeting, I would like to welcome 2 new board members. The town board reviewed all members of the Montgomery IDA recently and appointed 2 new members, starting with Randy Green, my far right. Welcome, Randy.
Thank you.
And Don Berger, to my left. They also reappointed Matt Stoddard on my far left, Bob Santo, myself, Jeff Christ, Ed Williams, and John Dixon. I would like to offer my sincere thanks to Steve Rinaldi and John Massiosi, who are retiring from this board. We appreciate their service and thank them for their time on the board. We have approval of minutes for our February 14th meeting, as well as the February 11th transcript of the public hearing, which appears on our website. Should those be voted on separately, Bob?
Yes.
So let's start with the 14th, since it's listed that way. Are there any additions, corrections to those minutes? Everybody should have a copy. Bob, I'm not sure what you would recommend for our new board members as far as weighing in on those minutes.
Since they were not members, you're free to vote, but I would counsel you that you should simply recuse yourself from voting because you were not members at that time.
Abstain.
Abstain from voting.
Is there a motion to approve those February 14th minutes?
I make that motion.
John Dixon, second to that. Thank you, Bob. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. And for the February 11th, 2020 transcript of the public hearing, is there any discussion there? It's a motion to approve by Ed Williams. It's 121 pages of reading. A second to that motion?
I have to abstain, I wasn't at that meeting.
Okay. Did you say second, Bob?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Any other discussion on the transcript of those public hearing comments? Call the question. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, the same. I believe we have 4 votes in favor, so that should carry. John Dixon, Randy Green, Tom Berger, all abstain. Moving on to our financial report for February. I believe Sue handed that out to us. Matt, our treasurer.
Yes.
It's right behind the agenda in my stack.
What are we on? We're on, bills?
We're on the financial report.
Okay, checkbook beginning balance from last report is $257,676. There was no checks written. In our Orange Bank and Trust, we have $257,676. With, in our 3 CDs, we have $54,633, $290,390, and the third one, $109,656, bringing you a total in your CD package of $454,680. Grand total of the two is $712,357.
So we had no expenses in February.
No checks.
Okay.
No.
And Bob, any guidance on our new members related to approval of the financial report?
They can vote on that.
I would think the numbers are here, and,
Mr. Chair, I do have one question on this.
yes, go ahead, Don.
I noticed on the 3 CDs, it says due, and the year being on all 3, 2018. Does that mean they're expired, or what's the,
I believe the CDs are open, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
they renew on their own, I mean.
Okay.
They renewed, they just automatically renew?
Yes, exactly. I
But-
didn't prepare this report, but.
We should check what they are now, Don.
I was just curious because you had the date of all 3 in 2018.
Right.
That's great cash, it's probably just a carryover,
Right.
but we can double check on that.
Yeah, and what the bank does is just send over a statement to my office, and then she just transfers it on to you.
But would you check on that, Matt, or you'd like Sue to?
No, I'll take care of it.
Okay. So we need a motion to accept the financial report.
I make that motion.
John Dixon, second to that motion. Second. By Ed, thank you. All in favor to accept this financial report for February 2020, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on to the UTEP, the Unified Tax Exemption Policy of this board. That policy is described fully in our website. We've had a number of comments over the last year or so that we should more carefully look at what those tax abatements are and consider adjusting those to be appropriate for times today. I know during the public hearings, there also was the comment at one point that that's our policy, that's what we work with once an applicant is underway. But now I think is a particularly good time to look at that policy and possible adjustments. We have limited number of projects right now, and I would just like to open up for board discussion and I might recognize our supervisor, Brian. Would you care to make any comments at this point, Brian?
Sure, and I'm just gonna project, because I don't have a microphone, which is fine by me. The whole idea for this, and we did invite the school district, I know Jeff had sent an email, I sent a follow-up, we really wanted to encourage them to be part of this discussion jointly with the town, the district, and this IDA board. The idea is to take a look at it, really from a strategy standpoint. The industry is really tough to determine what threshold that you want to set yourself at that doesn't also chase away potential companies that want to come in. But at the end of the day, there are practices throughout Orange County in different industries, such as maybe even hotels, where towns just won't bring pilots to a certain threshold because they know they're going to come in. They know that's where they want to be. And here in the town of Montgomery, we have the luxury of a really amazing infrastructure that's going to bring in business. So I just think having the conversation, me personally, I think 15 years is too high, but just having a conversation and starting at being open-minded to lowering that would be great. You might want to have a little bit of follow-up, maybe some sidebar committee work meetings to really determine that and do the due diligence and research you need to do, and tap into some other local IDAs that maybe have adjusted their policies as well. Maybe focus on some of the areas that some of these other businesses are going to that have a similar infrastructure in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and see, they obviously have a different tax structure than New York State, but the other benefits that come from being in this location. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, and I'm hoping to be a part of it in any way that you'll allow me to be. But keeping an eye on what the Orange County IDA offers, along with what we're going to do, is important. One thing that is important to note about, being in, I would say, competition with the Orange County IDA, I think Jeff and I have tried to establish a really good working relationship with them. So I would just warn the board to try not to dictate their conversations based on competing with the IDA. I think there is a really good level of communication that's been established from this point going forward, where we can identify what's good for the town and not have it be dictated based on a competition. That would be my only 2 cents. But I'm here to be helpful, here to put in my 2 cents, but I'm just happy that you're going to be bringing it up for discussion.
Thank you, Brian. And Bob, I might ask you to just review the process, because there's various steps, and I believe that this is a process that needs to take several months.
So the way that you should do this is, as the supervisor suggested, I would think that a committee, probably the finance committee, may want to take the lead with the chair. Look at some examples of current UTEP policies around the state, and in particular in the Hudson Valley. There's a way to compete, and there's an incorrect way to compete. Meet with the town board, have a meeting with the school district, and if the school district doesn't want to come here, I would suggest that or for whatever reason can't come here, I would suggest that the committee members meet with the school district at a school district meeting, and see what their input is. Ideally, over the next 30 to 60 days, you would do that type of fact-finding type of discussion, review, and develop a UTEP policy that would then be printed up. You would then have a resolution to hold a public hearing where you would send that UTEP policy that you were contemplating passing to the school district, to the town, to the county, all the taxing authorities. That would have to be on 30 days notice. And that would be different than the public hearing that you would hold for financial assistance. It would be a public hearing just to hear from those jurisdictions. It would not have to be at any particular time, on any particular day, but you would want to hear from the county, from the town, and from the school district. They can appear at the hearing, they can submit written comments, and then after that public hearing, there would be a report back to the board, and then you would vote on the new UTEP. So if you look at the timing of that, if it's done properly, and properly is probably too strong a word, I guess just deliberatively would be a better word. You're probably looking at 3 to 4 months to get a policy up and a new policy with the input that you really need from those taxing jurisdictions and other interested parties, stakeholders.
Thank you, Bob. Comments from the board, questions?
So, Mr. Chair, I'm wondering, you mentioned the financial committee. I'm sure things have changed since Randy and I have been members
Will you
here.
be just taking the places of the former members on those committees, or will you be restructuring them?
And Mr. Chair, before you certainly have 3 committees already. You have a governance committee, you have a audit committee, and a finance committee. And I know the chair wanted to address the vacancies on those committees at the end of this meeting. You can use one of the existing committees for this purpose. You can also appoint tonight a temporary committee for the purposes of looking at the UTEP policy. So I didn't mean to restrict it to just the finance committee. Okay, you could you'll appoint 3 members. Can't appoint 4 because then that's a quorum, and you'd have to notice every time you met. But on something like this, where you're actually looking to explore and potentially meet with other involved stakeholders at different times over the next several weeks, it makes sense to do that initially through a committee and then report back to the board what its findings are. And then as a board, in executive session, try and develop what the UTEP policy should be based on that committee report, and then present it at a public meeting, vote for the public hearing, and then go forward that way. I didn't mean to imply something different. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so to your question, Randy, I have some thoughts on committee makeup with this new board makeup. I'll present in a little bit and open it up for discussion. Bob and I hadn't talked about the committee process for the UTEP previously. I think it makes some sense. I like to have a thought process in my mind related to a timetable. I certainly don't see us being ready to really fine-tune a UTEP policy at our April meeting. I think maybe an appropriate goal would be to try to begin to narrow it down for our May meeting, which could presumably allow the public hearing for the taxing authorities in June, and then a decision this summer. Seems like it might be an appropriate time frame to investigate and have thoughtful input. I guess I would hope the whole board would be engaged in this process, but possibly having 3 board members in a committee to have some structure to take the lead does make sense. I'm not sure I'm prepared to come to conclusion on that, but I welcome input. Any thoughts from board members? Ed?
Is there problems with our current policy?
Only to the extent that there's been issues raised on the 15-year period.
But even though we have a 15-year period available, currently we can choose to use 10.
Yes.
So why would you want to restrict yourself to 10 when you can do it anyway on a case-by-case basis?
To the extent you vary from your existing UTEP policy, although you can do less than 15 years, you do need to notice the taxing jurisdictions, the fact that you're varying from the UTEP. There's an open question of whether or not, for example, in a project that you recently approved, the notice to the taxing authorities arguably did not have to occur because your change to the UTEP benefited them. Instead of going from a 0% for 5 years, it was to be 80% exemption for 5 years. So that was a benefit to the taxing jurisdictions. And since you weren't changing the policy to their detriment, there was a very good argument to be made that you didn't have to notice those authorities and provide them with an opportunity to comment. I think the better course is always, if you're changing the UTEP in any way, to give the taxing authorities notification, because if they really object to getting more money than they would otherwise be entitled, you should know that.
Oh, I understand that.
So the only comment that I would have would be that you need to keep in mind that any variance potentially has a notice requirement to the jurisdictions, and that could delay the consideration of the project for a period of time. Whether or not you want to change and overhaul the entire policy, that's a decision for the board. That's not my decision.
To partly respond to you, Ed, in the course of meeting with Orange County IDA, I took a closer look, and on their website is their UTEP policy. And they actually have 4-year pilot for hotels. Then they have 6 years, 10 years, and 15 years, specifically laid out, if my memory serves me correct. And Laurie spoke to segmenting some various types of business that you may need stronger encouragement to bring to town that would be more related to the 10 and 15-year pilots, and some that need just a little bit enticement, abatement, maybe more in the area of the 6-year pilot. It does make it more involved, but in this day and age that may be appropriate. It ties in a little bit with the comprehensive plan, I think, on what the community really wants in this town going ahead. There's still a number of areas that the town can be developed, and I think properly done should be developed. So I think there are some things to look at to better guide where we want to go on a community basis.
And I do say, I mean, annually you look at your policies and you review and improve those policies or make changes. The UTEP policy in this IDA hasn't really been explored, I guess is the right word, for 12 years. It's entirely appropriate to look at whether or not your current UTEP is right for the town. You may conclude at the end of the process that you're sticking with the exact same UTEP that you have today, all right? But over the last 12 years, some IDAs have changed to different types of time periods for a pilot based on the type of project, based on the dollar amount of the project. In the western part of the state, which I still owe you examples of, you know, some IDAs there, you know, of the 11 categories of projects, they have different UTEPs for each category, and different UTEPs within those categories for different types of thresholds reached. I personally, as an attorney, don't think that you should overcomplicate the UTEP policy by having 5 different types of UTEPs for 11 different types of projects. I mean, it gets a little unwieldy. But to your point, to your specific question, I think that after 12 years, without any real, other than a review annually, does it still work? Yes. It's entirely appropriate to take a pause, especially since there have been some requests to do so, and look at the policy. And there's nothing that says you can't re-adopt the existing policy.
Bob, sorry about that.
The largest stakeholder, that is the school district, has had no official input. We've had a couple of people demonstrating, holding up signs in the back, and there really is 2 entities there. There is the administration and the BCTA, the school, the union. And And the last thing they were involved in was the UNFI, and they were at odds. But doing this would officially allow them to have some input, rather than at the Amazon project, a couple of letters were written and really haphazardly. But this, I would agree, would be a great benefit for this district, just to know that they're part of this, and they had an input in it.
Don?
Is it also my understanding that if we decided to change the UTEP policy, that you could limit the usages under the UTEP policy, for instance, type of businesses that come into our community?
Bob?
The UTEP policy can be anything that you want it to be. Okay?
So you can segregate certain uses that would not qualify for a pilot.
Right.
So I think that it would make sense to be, to at least engage in something like this. It would make sense to me.
Anybody else care to make a comment, Randy?
I'm in favor of looking at everything, for sure. Somewhere between 5 different UTEP policies for 11 different projects and one. There's a middle ground that I think would be a lot better for the community as a whole. I think it's important for the school district to have an input so that there's a lot less adversarial relationships going on while we're looking at projects. So I think there's a lot of ways to eliminate a lot of the questions and a lot of the distrust that's been going on lately. If we talk to everybody, get everyone's opinion, and make an informed decision on how to move forward.
John, any comments?
I agree, you know, it's time to review it. 12 years is a long time.
You okay, Matt?
Got it.
Seems like it. I don't have a clear vision of how to initiate the steps in the committee.
So I think, Mr. Chair, if I could jump
Yes.
in, you and I discussed the need to have a special meeting
Right.
before the end of the month for audit purposes. Your audit is currently being done. The audit for this IDA has historically been late, which has required your late filing with the ABO. The goal of the chair this year was to make sure that that did not occur. Your ABO filing is due March 31st. The chair has really sat on, that's probably the wrong word, has really encouraged the auditor to do everything possible to be done by this month so that you can make a timely ABO filing. Regrettably, they're not done yet.
Why is that?
Partly because they could not get information from some of the recipients of the financial assistance, which is now being addressed. And partly because they sent a letter to my old firm with an incorrect date, saying that they could respond in April when the report is due this month. My old firm, my former firm, has now responded and submitted their audit letter, so that box has been checked off. I think the auditor should be done within a week. I will need a few days to get the information inputted into the ABO site. Ideally, next year, your executive director will take over that job and do that inputting.
Who's the auditor? I'm sorry.
Nugent.
Nugent and Hausler. I actually have a memo from them that I would probably report here in a couple minutes after
Sure.
we wrap
Okay,
up
great.
the UTEP. But you were saying we may be able to address the UTEP process in
So I
that
thought
special meeting.
You could do that at that special meeting, and that's still within this month and still keeps on the time frame that you just outlined.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Anything else on the UTEP at this moment? Very good. Well, that process, I think we can say, is kicked off, and I believe we have unanimous support to look at it and see where we need to be going ahead. Our next item is the Executive Director, RFP. The board late last year approved the RFP going out. For several reasons, that did not happen until about 10 days ago. I wanted to have further discussion with the new supervisor and administration on a thought process of how we house that position. And we do now have on our website the RFP job description. We have a notice asking for those to be, any applications to be submitted by end of business April 1st. Would allow us to have further discussion at our April meeting. It's a very comprehensive job description. I think it includes things that we might not need right now, but it keeps the door open for certain duties. And I've really appreciated over this last year how much is involved in this position. I honestly would like to see this person on board as soon as possible now to help with the UTEP discussion and process and help carry that process forward. So encourage board members, new board members who haven't seen the job description to take a look on the website. And we also have a link from the town website to that RFP. The supervisor suggested maybe we should put the notice in the local paper. I don't know if anybody reads those notices. I'm happy to do it. Any thoughts here on other places we should circulate that RFP?
Do we have any applications yet?
Good question. I received one today. So I haven't looked at it closely, but I am under the understanding this person has very good qualifications and could be a serious candidate.
So how would an applicant know to look on the website for an RFP? So it should go out, I would believe it should go out to, you have the Walker Valley Times here.
Sure.
I believe it should go out
Yep.
there to get more applicants come in, because, I personally wouldn't know to go look up on the website for that.
I think word of mouth to some degree from town board members, the supervisor. Bob knows it's out. If he came across someone in Albany, he could mention it, but there's obviously more we could do, Don. And I don't know if the paper is a lot better than the website when you get into the notices. How would someone know to go there to find a notice for an RFP on a job like that? But I think we should do it.
Yeah.
And if we think about it, Bob, you had a suggestion.
You could send it up to EDC.
That's right. Yeah.
They know people that are.
EEC?
EDC.
Oh, EDC.
The New York EDC. The sponsor of the training program that we talked about in New Paltz. And I don't know, Sue, does the town contract with the state reporter? Contract reporter at all? Probably not, yeah. So I don't think that's available, but I think the EDC would be a good resource for you.
Okay.
Do we have to choose, do we have to hire someone from the applicants that answer the RFP by April 1st? If we don't find someone that we think fits the bill, can we put out another one or extend it?
Oh, I would think we could certainly extend it or evolve it. But I don't think we could bring in someone else and hire without furthering the RFP. So hopefully we get several more to evaluate. This position is advertised for full-time. The salary is, the pay is not defined, it's dependent on qualification, experience, and so forth.
Who pays the salary? The town or the?
That would come out of the financials of the Montgomery IDA. That person would really be a 1099, I believe, employee, but at our disposal completely. We have found in the past that a part-time executive director, or at the time was described as a CEO, had so many demands, it was hard to meet our obligations and proper attention.
And I would note, Mr. Chair, that we will have to amend the bylaws, because the bylaws speak to a CEO.
Okay.
So once that's engaged, I'll do an amendment to the bylaws as well for
Okay.
the board to consider.
Does it matter what the title is?
No.
Okay. The other question.
But it should be consistent with the bylaws.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I meant if the bylaws said CEO, what's the difference?
Frankly, the modern trend is to have an ED, so.
The other question
It's
is.
up to the board.
Now, our last one, which was a CEO, he was part-time.
Correct, yes.
Now, I talked to the chair about this earlier today. Right now, we're behind, so we're gonna need him full-time, but that might be something that might taper off. Am I correct on that, Chair?
I think it's a possibility. I would be hopeful that there's so much opportunity to do things right in this town that its needs would become more demanding rather than less demanding.
Okay.
So I'm just curious, I know I haven't read the job description, I will as soon as I get out of here, I guess. But the person that gets this type of job, I'm just asking this question, not telling you what to do, but would this be under the purview of a grant writer? Would he or she have that ability to do that? Would they have the ability to go out and look for different companies that might be interested, we feel might be interested to come in here? Is that going to be the duties?
I would say definitely on the second part of your question, it's right in here to stimulate with the guidance of the board and the town, what we want in this town. And it states, I don't know if I can find it, here's one: research funding sources, oversee the development of funding plans, and write funding proposals to increase the funds of the agency. So I guess that would be a grant writer. I envision sometimes you need a grant writer who's really tuned in to push the right buttons, but that this person could oversee that and maybe even cooperate accordingly. They're supposed to also, right off the bat with leadership, help develop a vision and strategic plan for the agency. And that would again be guided by the comprehensive plan and other vehicles within the town. Just looking quickly, promote economic growth through the attraction of new business, industrial, and not-for-profit opportunities, while fostering the growth of existing businesses, industry, not-for-profits by contacting all significant or potentially significant existing employers. So this was written, it's basically the one we had before, except for adding in the full-time component to cover anything we might need in the best interest of this board and the town.
So would that person also sit on the new comprehensive plan committee to help guide what the direction the town should be taking?
I can speak to that if you'd like.
Sure, go ahead.
So our comp plan's been set, so they wouldn't be a voting member of the comprehensive plan committee, but we absolutely would consider them a stakeholder. So part of the comprehensive plan committee is identifying and having stakeholder meetings. And I think a good role for this individual, which will keep him or her very busy, is communicating with the initial stakeholders and introducing themselves to not just the large business community of warehouses, but also small businesses and local nonprofits, and creating a little more synergy and giving a face to the IDA within the community and really creating some goodwill. I think there's so much potential here. It's quite exciting. Specific to the comp plan, they'll be involved, but they wouldn't be a voting member.
Right. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other comments, questions on
I
the?
just have a quick question.
Yes, John.
I was just wondering now, this person, if we are, and he answers to us.
He or she would
He or she.
answer to us, yes.
Okay.
They would be at our disposal. We would direct them. Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to other business. We have a number of things here. Sue handed out our annual financial disclosure form, which I would ask you to return to Sue or down to the town clerk's office
Yes.
over the next week or two preferably. I don't think that's especially urgent, but actually I believe for new board members, 30 days, did you say this morning, Bob?
Well, no, that's for the oath, and I think
Okay.
everyone has done their oath already, so.
I have a question.
Randy?
Do I really have to list all my parents' property?
It's a town disclosure, it has nothing to.
I had a few questions last year. I didn't look at it again this
Not
year.
that I don't want to, it just says the relative means your spouse, child, stepchild, brother, sister, parent, or other person.
It's a town disclosure form, that's where your financial disclosure comes from. So if you have any questions, I would ask someone in the town clerk, I would imagine.
It's ethics board. So these come specific from the ethics board and the code in the ethics law. And it does actually say in the code for the ethics that new appointees have 30 days. So
Okay.
annually they're due May, I think it's 16th or 19th. But for those newly appointed officials like myself, I had to do it within 30 days according to the code. I actually missed that deadline because I didn't know about that code as
Okay.
well. But just so you all know and don't miss the deadline, and for newly appointed, and technically I think we appointed all of you again, whether it was reappointment or new. So I think you all technically might meet that 30-day threshold.
Randy, to your question, I don't know that I would even be sure of all the properties my sisters own. So I would think, and this is within the town of Montgomery, which helps limit it if your brothers and sisters live in another state.
Who's the chair of that, Joe Keenan?
It's still Joe Keenan. So I would give any inquiries to Joe, I would say to start, right?
Does he have a town email?
Yes, he does have a town email. J Keenan, KEENAN @townofmontgomery.com.
Related to those emails, I didn't ask it in training, Bob, but with Brian here, it might be a good time. Does the IDA need to have emails that are dedicated to the IDA but separate from the town of Montgomery emails?
That would be a best practice,
Okay,
and I think that you've now established that, at least
Mhm.
for the chair and for the executive director and for Sue.
it might be a fairly nominal cost for us each to have one. It would make disseminating information between the board and Sue and then our executive director.
Right. My only concern and request would be that it all, you know, if there's 7 different emails, which is fine, those emails would all have to go into one common location so
Oh,
that,
okay.
you know, we would not have to go into the chair's email to be able to find some information in the future.
Okay.
They would all be in one general file. I would defer to the web developer on that. That's probably way beyond my technology
Okay.
or discussion, but, and I think he did say that there was a nominal per email cost of under
Yes.
$10. I think it was under 10, or it was $10 an email, something like. very nominal. So.
Yes.
you can certainly consider that.
Yeah, I think we have a check to sign to that degree, so. Getting back to the, update on the audit, I have been working with our accountant, Jennifer Traverse of Nugent and Hausler. She did a memo dated yesterday to just update our, status on the audit. And she said, with all the activity last year, it's been a little bit more work than previous years. But I think last year, we began to get in a better groove on how to do it. I bet it was late. So right now, outstanding, we have one related party questionnaire from a board member that needs to be completed. And one project that's still participating in a pilot, UNFI, has not completed the information we need, which ties in with proving they're doing what they agreed to, or else we would recapture. And I believe in that case last year, you had to send them one last letter saying that we would need to begin that recapture process.
Right, and then they responded, so
Yes.
in their defense, not that I take sides, but in their defense, the letter from the accountant was going to their local address, and none of the executives are at the local address. And so whoever was receiving it here at the facility was not forwarding it on to the home office. The home office, their headquarters is in Rhode Island. When they received that demand letter, they were very cooperative. Jennifer did not have that address in January when she sent out her other letters. I gave her that address a couple of weeks ago. They have responded. I saw an email over the last several days saying that they were getting her the information, so I think that's in the works.
Yes, so I have every expectation those two open issues will be complete within the next week. And it is a little bit cumbersome, I think, to get this information, and we're learning to keep starting earlier. So.
If I may, sorry.
Yes, Randy.
Is that not maybe something we should add to their initial application? These are things that we need to have annually from you. Who would be the point of contact? It's required legally of you to give us notice if there's a different contact or a changeover. I mean, that's one of the things when I was researching IGAs, that's like one of the main issues is everyone's lack of accountability to get all this information in. It ends up being an us problem, so I'd like to change that if we can.
So, great comment, already in the documents. The requirement to notify is in the document. The form of disclosure, annual disclosure, are in the documents, in the closing documents. The accountant really just sends out the form as a reminder, here, you have to complete this. I think the gap here was that when I found out where the Rhode Island contacts were in like September or October, my failure was to notify Jennifer. I thought I did, but apparently I did not. And so I took care of that at the end of February, once she raised that at one of the meetings here as an issue. So yes, great comment. Yes, it's in the documents. Can't always compel the companies to do that ministerial notice. We changed our address information.
This would be something that an ED would handle once we hired him.
Absolutely.
Being on
Yes.
this more throughout the year.
Absolutely.
You got it.
Absolutely. In a perfect world, the executive director would reach out to the companies at the end of the year and say, hey, it's time for your annual disclosure. You'll begin in accounting. Where should that go? Accountant letter, where should that letter go? Who's the right person to fill it out? And we take care of all those issues.
Anything else on the annual audit update? The one last area Bob mentioned earlier we should address tonight is the appointment of officers, where we have a,
Mr. Chair, before you do that, you should have the special meeting before the month end.
correct,
For
yes.
the audit. So if the board members can consider that, you do need at least 4 members in order to consider it. Ideally, the accountant would provide a report. Ideally, the accountant would be here to at least report to the board. Well, ideally, the accountant would report to the audit committee. And then the audit committee would then report to the board. That would be the preferable way to do it, if there's only a written report. But before we can enter into any information into the ABO site, the board really needs to adopt the audit that's produced. And since you have a filing requirement of March 31st, you really need to have that meeting to adopt the audit findings.
This would be a meeting presumably taking probably 15 minutes, maybe 30 if we got into a little more discussion on the UTEP process. I don't know if board members like the 5:30 timeframe. We could, I'm not sure I can do it 2 weeks from tonight. No, I can't. I could, there's a planning, is there a planning board meeting on the 23rd? Or is that the 30th? So, for March.
30.
Okay. I don't know how the 23rd of March sounds for a is that enough time for you, Bob, or you want it the week before?
That's fine for me. I can't attend the meeting on the
Yeah.
23rd. I have a conflict, but I'm not sure that I'm necessary for that meeting. It's really an
You would
audit
be.
meeting. Well, I'm always necessary, but.
Yes, you're. How does March 23rd at 5:30 sound to everybody?
I'm available.
We good?
I'm good.
Because it would be nice to get something announced tonight. We would still do a special meeting notice.
Absolutely. And then I'll be available by phone if need be, but I just have another commitment.
Yep. And the agenda item for that night presumably would be to approve the annual audit, as well as carry on discussion for the UTEP review. Okay, on our appointment of officers, we have a vacancy in the second vice chair position, which Steve Rinaldi held. And I would suggest we discuss and possibly make a nomination for a second vice chair. Would anyone care to make a motion to nominate?
I'll make a motion to nominate John Dixon for second vice chair.
Is there a second to that motion? Second by Bob. Any other discussion? Are you willing, John?
Yes.
I'm sorry I didn't talk with you. Some of this was fairly short term. All in favor of voting for John Dixon, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Congratulations, John.
Thank you.
And on the committees, I have been looking at them. On our audit committee, we now have Ed Williams, Matt Stoddard. I would suggest Randy Green on that committee.
Need a motion?
I will, I want to ask Randy, is that something you would be open to?
Which one was it? I'm sorry, I was writing down my calendar.
The audit committee?
Okay.
And maybe before we do that, we'll do them all together. Finance committee, we currently have Matt Stoddard, myself, John Dixon. I think that could stay the same. I'm open to discussion. And on governance, there's myself, Bob Santo, and I would suggest Don Berger. What would be the duties of the governance committee, Bob?
So we didn't get to that in training. But
Thanks,
the governance committee really looks at the overall process of the agency with respect to the policies and procedures for making recommendations on appointments. And again, just overall governance of the agency on a month-to-month basis.
And the responsibilities of the audit committee?
The audit committee is supposed to work with the auditors annually to get a report from the audit, meet privately with the auditors to see if there were any findings, any inappropriate activity with the agency. And then the audit committee would report to the board what the findings of the audit report is. In addition, to the extent that there was any questions raised during the course of the year after the audit is completed with respect to the activities of the agency, the audit committee can reach out to the auditors and ask for a review of those activities.
Is there a reason that you would recommend me for one and down for the other, or?
Not particularly, except I'm aware you've done some studying, as you just mentioned a few minutes ago, on IDAs, and having that thought process, I think, would add value to you being on that committee.
I have a question. Bob, on this UTEP, would any committee be involved in, for instance, discussing with the school district, or would that be an ad hoc committee?
I think that's something we would discuss more at our special meeting in 13 days.
Would that be of the UTEP committee?
Well, do we really need a separate committee, or can we say it would be appropriate for John to meet with the school board and get them moved in, because he has a relationship with them and understands their workings, whereas, and yourself, you attend a lot of school board meetings, is it necessary to appoint a whole separate committee, or can we just kind of agree on who would work on what?
I don't think we have to appoint a separate committee, but Bob was suggesting some structure, but as I mentioned earlier, I hope we would all be engaged, and there could be a separation of duties for certain exploration. It's possible we could have two committees, one that did a certain part of it, maybe explore other IDAs and what's going on around the state, and one that would focus on the taxing authorities and what their efforts are. I think, as Bob mentioned, a number of meetings might be appropriate in a less than a quorum setting to explore and get into the nitty-gritty. Any thoughts, Brian?
Honestly, I think you guys are doing great. I like the idea of everyone being engaged, so whatever you guys decide, I have full confidence in, and I'll just be as supportive as I can be. Use me as a resource, but I think you guys are on the right track.
I do think you made a good point. I think the whole idea of one group going and looking at other IDAs and how they work their particular IDA, and then perhaps the second group dealing with the school district and the county or whatever it might be. Because if one committee does have 3 people, that would be an awful lot.
Yeah, yes. And I think we all have enough interests that would like to be engaged in the process, and I would hope that to be the case. So it's kind of evolving, Randy, and
So, and to answer your specific question, the bylaws of this agency, unlike many others, but you in particular have specific the duties of each committee set forth in your bylaws. So in the package I gave you earlier, there's specific duties of the governance committee, the audit committee, and the finance committee. So if you are appointed to the audit committee, you can look at those duties.
Okay.
so as far as modifying our committee members based on the makeup of the board now, that would take a motion, I would think, and that would be an adjustment to our annual resolution of officers' committee assignments.
Yes.
And meeting schedule.
And once voted, we would have to get that information to the
the web developer, the web
Yeah.
guru.
Yes.
So should we have the email address discussion all, and give it to them all at the same time?
I'm not sure we're gonna be ready to get that completed soon enough. And right now, the website really needs to be updated with the correct members. And I would think the audit committee and the email thing is almost another step from the website, if I understand it correctly. Listing the emails correctly on the website is appropriate, but first we have to form those emails, and I'm honestly having a little bit of challenge with the one they gave me, and making it smooth in use. So, I got a little more work to do there. Well, it's possible if it gets to involve the new executive director, if we find the right one, could help with that too.
You need a motion, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I would ask for a motion to approve the audit committee addition of Randy Green, and the governance committee, the addition of Don Berger. Do you want all the members, Bob, or is that good enough?
I would, since you've all been reappointed, I would reappoint all three committees, just as you said before.
Okay, so the audit committee, Ed Williams, Randy Green, Stoddard, finance, Matt Stoddard, myself, John Dixon, governance committee, myself, Don Berger, Bob Santo. And I would entertain a motion for those committees. Motion by Matt, is there a second to that?
Second.
Motion by Don. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Thank you. And the last thing I have on other business, we did talk about it in our training session briefly, is the IDA Academy for April 21st, which is in sunny New Paltz, SUNY New Paltz.
It's sunny too.
It's sunny too, yes. So, shut up before I get in more trouble, right? It's a one-day academy. There is a cost, I believe, of $85 per member, which the IDA would pay for. I'm not sure if everybody can attend. Anyone who can, I would encourage it. I have the agenda here, so I can send that to anybody who would like it. I don't know if we want any more training right now, which we started today. We could also plan to meet at 4:30 for the April meeting and continue. Does that make sense, Bob?
Whatever the board wants.
Any input, guidance on that?
I believe that'd be appropriate.
I kind of do. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
So we'll make an adjustment for that meeting to add the 4:30 hour for training
23rd.
on, is that April 23rd?
No, April
No.
14th.
Yeah, that would be on
Oh,
April
that's the next
14th.
one. Okay, I'm sorry.
That'll warm you up for the 21st in SUNY New Paltz. Do we need action on that, Bob? On those meeting dates?
No, we'll
Okay.
take care of it in the notice.
Yeah, okay. Any other business that needs to come before us tonight?
Want to ask about the IDA Academy once again?
Sure.
When do you need notification that you'd like to go? How are we gonna do that?
I believe they have a cutoff date, but I don't see it on this thing I printed. Oh, no refund after April 7th, so I would say by the 1st of April.
So we have to do that individually, or are we doing it as a board? You know, or is Sue gonna do that, or what? How's that work?
I didn't see that.
Yeah, let me figure that out and let you know. We'll see what's the easiest as far as payment and stuff, and get back to you. We could even wrap up discussion on that for the special meeting on the 23rd. Okay. Anything else for tonight? Thank you, everybody, for your attendance and public being here. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make that motion.
John Dixon, second to that motion by Ed, thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Do we have a meeting Friday morning? That was last month. You want to do it again? Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Good job, everybody.
Thank you for being here, Brian.
Thank you. I'll talk to you guys soon.